The sky above the mountain villa didn't just leak. It screamed. Thunder rolled through the peaks like a heavy artillery barrage, shaking the very foundations of the Jiang family's summer retreat. I had always loved the rain, but tonight, the atmosphere felt suffocating. I had been looking for Zhao Feng for an hour. Our engagement party was in full swing downstairs, a sea of silk, champagne, and forced laughter, but my fiancé had vanished. I walked down the long, dimly lit hallway of the West Wing, heading toward the guest suites. I thought perhaps the noise of the party had given him a headache. As I passed the large guest bathroom, I stopped. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar, and through the roar of the storm outside, I heard something else. It was a rhythmic, wet thumping, punctuated by sharp, muffled moans that didn't sound like pain. My heart began a slow, agonizing drumbeat against my ribs. I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The room was thick with steam, the scent of expensive eucalyptus soap cloying in the air. Through the frosted glass of the walk-in shower, two silhouettes were intertwined, a frantic dance of skin and betrayal. "Feng Ji, slower, someone will hear," a voice whispered. It was Mei, my personal assistant, the girl I had treated like a sister, the one I had shared all my secrets with. "Let them hear," Zhao Feng's voice replied, thick with a lust I had never seen directed at me. "Jiang Yue is busy playing hostess. She's as cold as the mountain air, Mei. I need someone with fire." I felt as though a frozen blade had been driven through my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply pulled the glass door back. The steam curled away to reveal the truth in its ugliest form. They scrambled apart, the water slicking their skin, their faces transforming from ecstasy to a jagged, ugly terror. "Yue, it's not. I can explain," Zhao Feng shouted, stepping out of the shower, reaching for a towel that couldn't cover his shame. "There is nothing to explain, Feng," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. "Get out of my house. Both of you." I turned and ran. I didn't go back to the party. I couldn't face the pitying eyes of the elite. I burst through the French doors into the raging storm, the freezing rain drenching my silk gown in seconds. I headed toward the cliffside path, the Stargazer's Point, where we were supposed to take our wedding photos. "Jiang Yue, stop." Zhao Feng's voice boomed behind me. He was chasing me, his face twisted in a panic that wasn't for me, but for his reputation. "If you tell anyone, I'll lose everything. My father will disown me." "You already lost everything the moment you touched her," I screamed back, my voice lost in a crack of thunder. I reached the edge of the path. The ground was a slurry of mud and pine needles. As I turned to face him, my heel caught on a jagged root. I felt the world tilt. My hands clawed at the air, catching only the freezing rain. "Yue," he yelled, but he didn't reach for me. He stood there watching. I fell. The descent was a blur of branches tearing at my skin, and the roar of the wind. I hit the jagged rocks of the ravine, the pain a sudden, white-hot explosion before the darkness claimed me. My last vision was a pair of calm, sorrowful eyes looking down at me from the shadows of the pines. A man I didn't know. A man who was too late. I woke up with a gasp that felt like a needle in my lungs. I expected the cold dampness of the ravine and the smell of my own blood. Instead, I smelled cedar, expensive perfume, and the faint, sweet scent of mountain air. I sat up abruptly, my hands flying to my throat. No bruises. No broken skin. I looked around. I was in the master suite of the villa. My luggage was open on the bed, my white engagement gown draped over a chair. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Friday, June 14th, 10 a.m. The start of the mountain retreat. 12 hours before the party. 12 hours before my death. "Miss Jiang, are you awake? Zhao Feng is asking if you want to go for a morning hike." The door opened and Mei walked in. She looked so innocent, her eyes bright with a fake loyalty that made my stomach churn. She was holding a tray of herbal tea, my favorite. "I'm awake, Mei," I said, my voice tight. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the subtle way she touched the pearl necklace I had gifted her. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale," she said, setting the tray down. "I had a nightmare," I replied, standing up and walking to the window. The sky was clear blue, but I knew the storm was coming. I knew the exact moment the clouds would break. A nightmare about falling, and about being pushed. May laughed, a light, tinkling sound that now sounded like shattering glass. "You're just nervous about the engagement. Mississippi Zhao Feng is so excited. He's been talking about the party all morning." "I'm sure he has," I said. "Tell him I'll meet him downstairs in an hour. And May, make sure the guest bathroom in the West Wing is fully stocked with that eucalyptus soap he likes. I want everything to be perfect." As she left the room, I sank onto the bed. I had been given a second chance, a glitch in the universe that allowed me to rewrite the ending. I wasn't going to run this time. I wasn't going to be the one falling into the ravine. I stood up and went to my vanity. I pulled out a small, high-definition camera I had bought for my vlogging hobby. It was no larger than a button. I tucked it into my pocket. "Phone, May," I whispered to my reflection. "You wanted a show. I'm going to give you an audience." I dressed in a practical hiking outfit. If I was going to change the future, I needed to meet the man I saw in my final moments. The man with the sorrowful eyes. I remembered the path he had been standing on, a restricted area of the mountain that led to a small, secluded cabin. I left the villa through the back entrance, avoiding the staff. The mountain air was crisp, but I could already feel the humidity rising, the precursor to the storm. I hiked upward, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I reached a clearing where the trees grew thick and ancient. There, standing by a small stone well, was a man. He wore a simple white linen shirt and dark trousers. He was tall, his presence as steady as the mountain itself. He turned, and my breath hitched. It was him. Shen Yi, the mysterious doctor who had moved to the mountains 3 years ago and was whispered to be a genius who had turned his back on the world. "You're off the trail, Miss Jiang," he said, his voice a deep, calm melody. "The villa is 2 miles back." "I know where I am, Dr. Shen," I said, stepping closer. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. There was a flicker of something recognition. "You look like someone who has seen a ghost." "I am the ghost," I said. "And I think you're the only one who can help me stay alive." Shen Yi didn't ask me to explain. He simply watched me with an intensity that made me feel more seen than I had ever felt in 5 years with Zhao Feng. He gestured for me to follow him toward his cabin, a structure of stone and dark timber that seemed to grow out of the hillside. "You know my name," he said as we walked, "but I don't recall us being introduced at any of your family's functions." "We weren't," I replied. "But I saw you. In a dream. You were standing by the ravine, looking down at me." He stopped in his tracks, his hand resting on the wooden gate of his garden. His eyes narrowed. "The ravine is dangerous, Miss Jiang. Especially when the storms come. Why were you there in your dream?" "I was running from someone I thought I loved," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And I fell. You were there, but you couldn't reach me in time. This time, I'm not going to fall. But I need to know why you were there." Shen Yi opened the gate and led me into a small porch filled with drying herbs and medical texts. "I perform a vigil," he said quietly. "Every year on the night of the storm, I go to the ravine. It's where I lost someone I couldn't save. I've always had a feeling the mountain would claim another soul. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind swept over me. It was supposed to be me tonight." He poured me a cup of tea made from wild ginger and honey. "You talk as if the future is a book you've already read. If that's true, why are you here? A woman of your status should be preparing for her engagement party." "The man I'm engaged to is currently planning his future with my inheritance and my assistant," I said, the bitterness finally leaking into my voice. "Tonight, at the party, I'm going to expose them. But Zhao Feng is dangerous when cornered. In my dream, he chased me into the storm. I need a witness. Someone whose word the police and the families can't dispute." Shen Yi leaned back against the porch railing, the sunlight catching the sharp angles of his face. He looked less like a doctor and more like a guardian. You want me to be your insurance policy. I want you to be the person who catches me, I said. I don't play games with the elite, Miss Jiang, he said. But I also don't like seeing the mountain used as a graveyard. I will be there, in the shadows. But if you take a single step toward that cliffside, I will drag you back myself. Do we have a deal? Deal, I said. I left his cabin and headed back to the villa. My mind was sharp, my plan crystallizing. As I approached the estate, I saw Zhao Feng and Mei standing by the pool. They were laughing, their heads close together. Mei reached out and smoothed the collar of his shirt, a gesture so intimate it made my skin crawl. Yue, Zhao Feng called out, his fake smile bright and predatory. Where have you been? We were about to send out a search party. Just clearing my head, Feng, I said, walking up to them. I forced a smile. I wanted to make sure I was ready for our big night. Mei, did you check on the guest bathroom in the West Wing like I asked? Yes, miss, she chirped. The eucalyptus soap is there, and I've put out the fresh towels. Good, I said. I think I'll take a nap. I want to be wide awake for the festivities. As I walked away, I felt their eyes on my back. They thought I was the lamb. They didn't realize I had already visited the lion. By late afternoon, the first clouds began to gather over the peaks, heavy and dark with the weight of the coming storm. The villa was a hive of activity. Caterers were setting up the grand hall, and the florist was draping the banisters in white roses, flowers that, in my previous life, had looked like funeral wreaths to me. I sat in my room, watching Mei through the vanity mirror as she brushed my hair. She was being overly attentive, her voice a constant stream of flattery. You'll be the most beautiful bride in the country, Miss Jiang, she said, her eyes fixed on the reflection of the diamond necklace on my neck. Zhao Feng is so lucky to have you. The Jiang and Zhao merger will be the talk of the year. It certainly will be, Mei, I said. You've been with me for 3 years now. You've seen everything, haven't you? She paused, the brush stilled for a microsecond. I try to be observant, Mississippi. It's my job to take care of you. And you take care of Feng so well, too, I said, my voice conversational. I noticed his favorite cufflinks were missing this morning, and you found them in seconds. You really know his tastes. Mei's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. I just want everything to run smoothly for the wedding. I know how much you care about the details. I do, I said. I reached into my jewelry box and pulled out a small, exquisite gold bracelet. It was a piece I had intentionally left out. Here. I want you to have this. For all your loyalty. She took the bracelet, her eyes gleaming with greed. Miss, I couldn't. It's too much. Take it, I said. Think of it as a parting gift. She looked confused but thanked me profusely, slipping it onto her wrist. I knew exactly what that bracelet would do. It had a small, GPS-synced tracker embedded in the clasp. I needed to know exactly where she was at all times tonight. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the guests began to arrive. The elite of the business world, our family friends, and the vultures of the press. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, dressed in the same white silk gown that had been my shroud. Zhao Feng met me at the bottom, taking my hand. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I had to fight the urge to flinch. He smelled like the eucalyptus soap I had told Mei to put in the bathroom. The smell of his betrayal. You look breathtaking, Yue, he whispered. Ready to make history? Oh, Feng, I said, looking into his cold, ambitious eyes. We're going to make history tonight. I promise you that. The party was a blur of music and meaningless conversation. I played the role of the blushing bride-to-be perfectly. I laughed at the right moments, drank just enough champagne to look festive, and kept a constant eye on my phone. At 9 p.m., the GPS tracker on my phone showed Mei moving toward the West Wing. A minute later, Zhao Feng excused himself, claiming he needed to check on a business call from his father. I waited 5 minutes. Then, I stood up and tapped my glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. Everyone, if I could have your attention, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. I have a special surprise for my fiancé, but it's in the West Wing gallery. If you'll all follow me, I'd like to share this moment with all of you. The guests, intrigued by the promise of drama or a grand gift, followed me like a trail of ants. I saw Shen Yi standing by the back doors, his eyes steady on mine. He gave me a single, slow nod. The storm broke just as we reached the hallway. Thunder shook the glass panes, and the rain began its rhythmic drumming. I led them to the guest suite door. I didn't stop to listen this time. I knew what was behind that door. I reached out, turned the heavy iron key I had retrieved earlier, and locked the bathroom door from the outside. Then, I reached for the red lever on the wall. "What are you doing, Yue?" my father asked, stepping forward, his brow furrowed. "I'm starting the celebration, father," I said. I pulled the fire alarm. The shrill, piercing scream of the fire alarm tore through the elegance of the villa. High-intensity strobe lights began to flash in the hallway, reflecting off the terrified faces of the guests. The automated sprinkler system in the west wing groaned to life, sending a fine mist of cold water over the expensive carpet. "Jiang Yue, what is going on?" my mother cried, clutching her pearls. "Is there a fire?" "Not a fire, mother," I said, my voice cold and calm amidst the chaos. "A clearing of the air." The guests were panic-stricken, but I stood my ground, my back to the locked bathroom door. From inside, the sound of frantic splashing and shouting erupted. "Open the door." "Who locked it?" "Help." Zhao Feng's voice was muffled by the heavy oak, but the desperation was clear. "What is that?" one of the board members asked, pointing at the door. "Is someone trapped in there?" "It seems so," I said. I turned to the bathroom door. "Foam? Is that you? Why are you in the guest bathroom during our party?" The muffled voices stopped for a heartbeat. Then, May's voice, shrill with terror, rang out. "Please, open the door. The sprinklers are soaking everything." My father stepped forward, his face red with a mix of confusion and mounting anger. "Zhao Feng? And your assistant? What are they doing in there together?" "I was wondering the same thing, father," I said. I pulled out my phone and hit the broadcast button. The small camera I had hidden in the eucalyptus soap dish earlier that afternoon began to stream directly to the massive jumbotron in the grand hall downstairs, where the rest of the staff and press were waiting. On the screen in the hallway, and downstairs for all to see, the steam cleared as the cold sprinkler water hit the room. There they were, naked, wet, and caught in the most humiliating tableau imaginable. Zhao Feng was frantically trying to cover himself with a bath mat, while Mei was huddled in the corner of the shower, her face a mask of ruined ambition. The gasps from the guests were like a physical wave. The cameras of the press members who had followed us began to flash incessantly. You set this up." Zhao Feng screamed from inside the room, banging on the door. "Jiang Yue, you bitch. Let us out." "I didn't tell you to go into the shower with my assistant, Feng," I said, my voice echoing over the alarm. "You chose that path yourself. I just decided to share your joy with our friends." I looked at my father. His eyes were cold, his jaw set in the way it only did when he was about to destroy a business rival. "Security," he barked. "Get them out of there. And then get them off my mountain." But I wasn't finished. I knew Zhao Feng. I knew his rage. As the security guards approached with the master key, I stepped back toward the French doors that led to the balcony. The storm was at its peak. I looked out into the darkness and saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods.
Shen Yi.
He was waiting. The door was kicked open. Zhao Feng burst out, wrapped in a sodden towel, his face purple with rage. He didn't care about the guests or the cameras anymore. He saw only me. "I'll kill you," he roared, lunging past the guards. I didn't run into the hallway. I ran out into the rain. The cold rain hit me like a million tiny needles, but I didn't feel the chill. I felt alive. I ran along the stone balcony, the same path I had taken in my previous life. The wind was howling, trying to push me back, but I pushed through it, my lungs burning. "Jiang Yue, you think you can ruin me and just walk away?" Zhao Feng was behind me, his footsteps heavy and uneven on the wet stone. I reached the end of the balcony where it transitioned into the muddy cliffside path. I slowed down, my heart hammering. This was the spot. This was where the mud had given way. This was where I had died. I stopped and turned. Zhao Feng was 10 feet away, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. The towel had fallen away, and he was a pathetic, shivering figure in the rain, but his malice was greater than ever. "There's nowhere left to go, Yue," he sneered, his voice barely audible over the thunder. "One little push, and everyone will think you committed suicide out of the shame of my affair. I'll be the grieving widower-to-be. I'll still get the Jiang merger." "You really haven't learned anything, have you?" I said. I looked down at the mud. It was shifting exactly as I remembered. But I wasn't wearing heels this time. I was wearing the hiking boots I had swapped into under my gown earlier. "Goodbye, Foam," I said. He lunged. I stepped to the side, my feet finding the solid rock I had mapped out that morning. Zhao Feng, blinded by rage and the driving rain, hit the slurry of mud at full speed. He slipped. His hands clawed at the air, his eyes widening as he realized there was nothing but a void beneath him. He didn't fall into the ravine, however. His shirt caught on a jagged outcrop of rock just 5 feet down. He hung there, dangling over the abyss, screaming for help. I walked to the edge and looked down. "Help me. Yue, please. I'm sorry. I'll do anything." I didn't answer. I felt a hand on my shoulder, solid, warm, and steady. Shen Yi was standing beside me. He held a high-powered flashlight, the beam cutting through the rain to illuminate Zhao Feng's pathetic struggle. "Is this how it ended before?" Shen Yi asked, his voice calm against the storm. "No," I said. "Before, he watched me fall. This time he's the one hanging by a thread." "The police and the rescue team are coming up the path," Shen Yi said. "They saw everything from the balcony. You don't have to do anything else." I looked at Zhao Feng. He was sobbing now, the mud dripping into his eyes. Behind us, I could hear the shouts of my father's security and the sirens of the mountain rescue team. "I'm not going to kill you, Feng," I said, loud enough for him to hear. "That would be too easy. I want you to live. I want you to live every day knowing that the woman you thought was a cold doll is the one who took your world away and left you hanging in the dark." I turned away from the cliff. I didn't look back as the rescue team moved in with their ropes and harnesses. I didn't look back as Mei was led away in handcuffs for the financial fraud I had already reported to the authorities that morning. I looked at Shen Yi. He was still holding the flashlight, but his gaze was on me. "You kept your word," I said. "I told you," he replied, a small, rare smile touching his lips. "I don't like seeing the mountain used as a graveyard. Let's get you out of the rain, Jiang Yue." The morning after the storm was unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that only exists after a great fever has broken. The clouds had vanished during the night, leaving the mountain peaks glistening like jagged diamonds under a sky of pale, heartless blue. I stood on the terrace of the villa, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Below me, the driveway was a hive of official activity. The flashing lights of the police cruisers and the mountain rescue vehicles seemed garish and out of place against the ancient pines. The villa, once a symbol of my family's untouchable status, was now a crime scene. I watched as forensic teams in white suits moved in and out of the West Wing, carrying bags of evidence, likely the eucalyptus soap, the tampered fire alarm, and the recording devices I had strategically placed. Zhao Feng was already gone, transported to the hospital under heavy police guard with a fractured leg and a reputation that was dead on arrival. Mei had been escorted out in handcuffs hours ago, her shrill cries for mercy finally silenced by the slamming of a cruiser door. "He's stable, but the doctors say he won't be walking without a cane for a long time," my father said, stepping out onto the terrace behind me. His voice was a shadow of its usual booming authority. I turned to look at him and saw a man who had aged a decade in a single night. He was still wearing his tuxedo trousers from the party, but his shirt was rumpled and his eyes were bloodshot. He looked at me with a mixture of profound guilt and a new, unsettling kind of awe. "I never knew you were," my father said, his voice cracking as he looked out at the ravine. "I thought he was a good man. I thought I was securing your future by merging our houses. I almost handed you over to a monster." You are doing what you thought was best for the legacy, father, I said, my voice steady and devoid of the cold doll persona he was used to. But I realized that the only person who can truly secure a Jiang's future is a Jiang. I'm calling off the merger. I want to take over the Jiang operations myself, starting with the internal audit of Zhao Feng's contributions. He looked at me, surprise flickering in his eyes, followed by a slow, proud nod that felt like a coronation. You showed more strength last night than any CEO I've ever sat across from in a boardroom. The company is yours, Yue. Do what you must. He left me then, his shoulders slumped as he went to deal with the lawyers. I walked down the stone steps of the terrace toward the edge of the estate. I saw a figure standing by the stone well where the mountain path began. Shen Yi was there, his hands in his pockets, looking as immovable as the peak itself. I hear the villa is being closed up for the season, Shen Yi said as I approached. It is, I replied. I'm heading back to the city to take over my father's chair. There's a lot of rot to clear out, and I don't plan on being gentle about it. The city is a noisy, crowded place for someone who has looked into the eye of the storm, Shen Yi said, his gaze searching mine. I'm not the same person I was before I fell, Dr. Shen, I said, stopping just inches from him. I think I can handle a little noise. But I haven't forgotten the deal we made. About the vigil you perform every year for the soul you couldn't save. The vigil is over, Jiang Yue, he said softly. He reached out, his thumb grazing my cheek, his touch as cool and refreshing as the mountain air. I don't need to look into the ravine for ghosts anymore. I have the survivors standing right here. I'm not a ghost, Shen Yi, I whispered. No, he said, leaning in until our foreheads touched. You're the woman who caught the storm. And I think the mountain is going to be very lonely without you. He kissed me then, a deep, slow kiss that tasted of pine, survival, and a future that wasn't dictated by fear. In his arms, I finally felt the last of the ravine's chill leave my bones. I wasn't just a girl who had been given a second chance. I was a woman who had taken it. 6 months later, the boardroom of the Jiang Corporation felt less like a battlefield and more like my kingdom. I sat at the head of the long obsidian table, the city skyline sprawling behind me like a tapestry of light and steel. I had spent half a year systematically dismantling every ghost Zhao Feng had left behind. He was now a permanent resident of a high-security cell, his name a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones across the financial district. I leaned back, closing the final report on our record-breaking quarterly earnings. I was the woman who had survived the fall, but my heart wasn't in the profit margins or the cold perfection of this office. It was 200 miles away, rooted in the stone and pine of a mountain that had once tried to claim me. My phone vibrated on the desk. A photo appeared, the first dusting of snow on the peaks, the white powder looking like powdered sugar against the dark evergreens. The cabin is warm, and the ginger tea is waiting, the message read. But the bed is far too cold. Come home, Yue. A slow, genuine heat spread through my chest. I didn't delegate the rest of my meetings. I simply stood up, grabbed my coat, and left. I was done with the city. I was going to the man who had seen my soul when it was shattered and helped me piece it back together with fire and starlight. By the time I drove up the winding mountain pass, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the snow in shades of violet and gold. I pulled up to the stone cabin, and before I could even cut the engine, the door swung open. Shen Yi stood in the doorway, the warm amber light from the hearth framing his tall, broad-shouldered silhouette. He didn't wait for me to walk to him. He descended the porch steps in 3 long strides, his eyes burning with a hunger that made my knees weak. "You're late," he murmured, his voice a low, delicious growl. Before I could answer, he reached for me, his large hands framing my face. His palms were warm against my chilled skin, his thumbs tracing the line of my cheekbones with an almost reverent tenderness. He pulled me into him, and I melted against the solid wall of his chest. He smelled of cedarwood, dried herbs, and that clean mountain air that had become my oxygen. "I had a company to run, Doctor," I whispered against his lips. "The company can wait." "I've waited long enough," he replied. He kissed me then, A deep, possessive kiss that tasted of survival and absolute devotion. His tongue swept against mine, claiming me all over again, while his hand slid down to the small of my back, pulling me so close I could feel the steady, frantic thrum of his heart through his heavy knit sweater. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him deeper. He eventually broke the kiss, but only to trail a path of fire down my jawline to the sensitive hollow of my throat. I let out a soft moan, my head falling back as I leaned into his strength. He scooped me up into his arms as if I weighed nothing, carrying me across the threshold and into the warmth of the cabin. He set me down by the crackling fire, but he didn't let go. He sat behind me on the plush rug, pulling me back between his legs so my back was against his chest. His arms wrapped around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. "The vigil is over, Yue," he whispered into my ear, his breath hot and sending shivers down my spine. I used to look at the ravine and see a debt I couldn't pay. Now I look at the stars and see the woman who caught me. He took my hand, interlacing our fingers. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing each knuckle with a slow, deliberate intimacy. "I don't want you to be a CEO or a ghost tonight. I just want you to be mine." "I am yours," I said, turning in his arms to look into those dark, soulful eyes. "In every life, in every timeline, it was always meant to be you." The girl who fell into the dark was gone. The woman who rose was exactly where she belonged, wrapped in the arms of the man who had taught her that, even after the most terrifying fall, the only way to go was up. As the snow began to fall heavily outside, sealing us into our private sanctuary, I knew I wasn't afraid of the heights anymore. I was finally home, above the clouds.